and welcome to this week's episode of OffSet Out of the Box. My name is Nosh Lois. Out of the Box is an interview series where we interview some of the most interesting music educators who are doing things differently and essentially thinking out of the box. And our guest for this episode is exactly that. Vasundhara Vee is no stranger to the music industry or the education industry. She's one of the most sought after vocal trainers in the country, somebody who studied under Mark Baxter, and honestly doesn't need much of an introduction at all. We were lucky to host and curate a workshop with her last year, and it was honestly one of my personal favorites, purely because, contrary to my expectation, she was the least intimidating person to learn from. So welcome, Vasundhara. So happy to have you on this series.
Thank you, Nush. That was quite an introduction.
Well,
thank you. So sweet.
Put down at all, believe me. I think where I want to start with is in our country, when it comes to Western vocal education, we're all trained in the Bel Canto approach. And then if we choose to become a contemporary vocalist, we then adapt the Bel Canto style to that. Can you give us an insight to the style that you've learned and that you execute? Because it's something that it was very eye-opening for me. So.
Thank you. Yeah, well, Bel Canto is pretty much the standard. It's become common sense now for some reason, but it's because it's been around for so long. So that's also how I understood singing till the time I lost my voice. And it's obviously not because of the technique. It's because my technique was horrible. And I got really lucky because, Mark allowed me to start learning from him. And I had voice loss at that time. I had nodules, and for about a good 2 years, I couldn't even speak properly. And I was at that juncture where people said that, you probably need to go in for surgery. And it was too scary back then because, I didn't know if my voice would come out the same.
And nodules is everyone that's like your worst nightmare as a vocalist is nodules.
Yeah, it is. And the first thing that Mark taught me was that there's nothing to be scared of because it's a behavioral thing. The way you're using your vocal folds is causing the nodules, and the nodule in itself is not like a disease or something, even though it's extremely debilitating. And it also takes a huge emotional toll because, so many singers, we just identify ourselves with singing. And without that, for a while, I didn't know who I was, what I was. And so Mark took me under his wing, and I've been practicing his method for 8 years. And it's changed my life. And more than anything else, I just love the simplicity, the lucidity, the logic of it. And when I kind of got into his teachings, I was like, wait, this should have been common knowledge.
Right? Yeah. I did the same thing at your workshop. I was just like, wait, like I had to unlearn so much that day. So go ahead.
Yeah, so and as far as teaching came about, it just happened. People started asking me to teach, and I never felt ready. So I would email Mark saying, I don't know what to do. People asking me to teach, and I don't want to con them or do something wrong. And he's always encouraged me, and he gave me that thumbs up, and he probably felt I was ready to pass on the information. And so, like, very, very, like, jittery and scared, I started about 5 years ago. And I just realized more than anything else that the role of a teacher has changed. And it's not so much about passing on information, because there's so much information everywhere.
Absolutely.
I think we are our roles now are to process and present and give people like the ability to sieve through like the information overload and the confusion that overload causes. And I think the most rewarding part of getting to pass the method on to people has been to see that they realize that they are much more than they ever imagined. Like them realizing that, wait, I do nothing and so much happens.
Yeah.
It just I live for those moments because it's just so empowering and just great.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that actually goes into my next question, which is basically this technique and the little that I have, I mean, from your workshop with us to seeing what you're doing on Instagram every like Saturday morning at 9 a.m., which, by the way, people who are watching, you should definitely come on for this because it's super fun. Is it's a very kind of mind body technique of like, and because you make us very aware of what's happening anatomically with us, and then also kind of like know that with your mind you can control so much and that you can do so much and you can change like small things like projection, like registers and those kind of things, which it we're not aware of it because we're constantly thinking of it as such a technique. Can you dive into a little more into that whole mind body connection in this method?
Yes. Well, all the science and all the anatomy and all the notions that science has given us points to one thing, and that is that the voice is innate. It's not something that we control. It's something that reflects us. In a sense, it's part of a bigger narrative that says that the body is the mind, and uh, and so the voice is a small part of that narrative, and but it's the part of the narrative that we can play the most with because it's the most pliable. It changes at an instant. It's difficult to understand how our body is really our mind because the rest of the body takes so much time to first release its emotions and its stresses and its embedded understanding. So that's a much slower process, but the voice just makes it much quicker
Yeah.
to see that relationship. So yes, one thing is that the body is the mind, and the second thing is that singing is the human animal sings. It's not an art, it's an innate ability that we have. And the moment we separated the humanity, the not just the humanity, the fact that this is everybody's to own rather than just a performer's prerogative. The moment we separated that, I think we took away something very important from humanity. And singing is not only one of the innate things. There are so many old diagnostic techniques that are based straight up of people's voices.
Yeah.
It's a real mirror to not just our mental state, but our physiological, psychological state, everything.
Yeah.
So, this language of music is much more powerful than music theory, and it's also much more powerful than technique. It's something which has a life of its own, and as the times change, we need to start embracing that again. Music has never been entertainment. Cat videos can be entertainment, but
Yes.
music is not, because the depth of influence is different. Joy and entertainment is amusement. Music's not that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like it's
so
something that as simple as like when people say, "Oh, I heard this song and it got me through a difficult time," and you're right. That's not entertainment. It's deeper than that. So also, I like something that you said a couple of your sessions ago. I think 2-3 weeks ago, where you said that when people ask you what your range is, it's the human range, and I love that because it's always just like, oh, I sing lower or I sing higher, and or whatever. I'm an alto, I'm soprano, and then you were just like, you have a human range, and that is, and I think that just automatically switches something in your mind because then the possibilities are endless. So
oh yes.
yeah.
Yeah, everything we know about our voices is basically a map of how the only way we know how to use our voice. There's so many other ways we can use it too. And like if I were raised in a different family, my voice would have been completely different, because apart from the innate instrument, it's also the usage habit, which
Yes,
would have been quite different.
of course, of course. Um, okay, now I want to talk about these sessions that you've been doing. When the city went into lockdown, you initiated a Instagram live session every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And initially, if correct me if I'm wrong, but you started this as being a let's all come together and just warm up, right?
Yeah.
And it just went, now we're 2 months in, and you're holding weekly classes for an hour every Saturday, which are, and what I love is we see the same faces, or rather the same Instagram handles. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
and I almost feel, because I tune in, I've tried to tune in almost every Saturday. I think I've missed only one or two, but I've been there. And you see, it feels like we're all in the same room, and
Yeah.
uh, everyone's so comfortable asking questions. And this has been a thing where vocalists, there was a time where vocalists didn't want to say these kind of things, but to see people being that open. um, Two questions to this is, firstly, a lot of the issues that we see are something that most, at least the questions that come to you, a lot of the vocal issues that come to you are things that everyone has. And it's something that, I mean, almost all of us have suffered it at some point. So where do you think that is stemming from? Like the issue, if there is an issue at all, if you have an opinion on that, I would like to hear that. And secondly, what inspired you to go into saying, let's just do these as like weekly classes?
Okay, I think I can start backwards.
Okay.
Um, yes, I really wanted to get together and sing with a lot of singers, because a lot of people face trouble motivating themselves to do something regularly. And but then, I was like, I don't want to just make this a pitch exercise. I want people to know what's underneath it. And if I'm getting people to repeat something that only exacerbates an older problem or an older limitation, then that's not right. So I just felt it would be wrong for me not to share how I understand practice.
Yeah.
And so it kind of became a mix of sharing and practicing together. And yes, I feel, I don't want to call it misinformation, because in the beginning I was very angry about what was happening, because I had lost my voice to a lot of what people would call misinformation. But I just feel it's confusion.
Yeah.
It's not easy to understand an instrument where the source of sound is not felt.
Yes.
So people in all their innocence and all their good intention, they tried to form a map for their voice.
Yes.
And it so it's just getting singers to overcome the confusions and to slowly start gathering trust in the automatic nature of their voice.
Yes.
So I think many things keep coming up every single class, and many of the same questions keep coming up, but they bear repetition, because the more we think of those things, the more the new concepts will ingrain in our bodies.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just, I mean, we need to debunk a bunch of things, and we need to start feeling fierce. And this whole thing, Nush, about feeling isolated and about the internet tearing people apart, it is true in one way, but it's so completely opposite for the sessions that we've been having.
Yes. I couldn't agree more.
I just feel so close to everyone.
Yes.
And
Also, I mean, as someone who's attending it, when people put out whatever their questions, and it happens so fast, but as I'm reading it, it's a lot of it is so reassuring, because it's like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, I'm feeling the same thing. Like if this one's saying she's having this problem, am I having this problem? Yes, I am. And it's
yeah,
very reassuring. And I also feel like, and I remember us having this conversation earlier where we felt that vocalists need to interact more, because we don't. We always meet at like a gig and it'll be like, hi, hello,
Yeah.
but we don't ever meet to sing or just share, ideas and share and tips and tricks and all of that. So I love it.
Yeah.
I look forward to that Saturday morning now where like we're all literally, it feels like we're all in the same room. So
Yeah, and singing is a group activity actually.
yes.
And it's just again that same idea of calling singing as entertainment industry, and a profession that has brought in a sort of um, um, antagonistic relationship between singers, which we need to kill now.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I completely agree. Okay, so to wrap it up, I want to ask you for 3 key tips you would give any vocalist today. It can be anything.
Okay, how do I sum it up? Well, if number one, there's nothing called a high note or a low note. Much as that might feel shocking, it's true. Notes aren't arranged spatially in that way, and so there's no need to push for anything that you consider high or low. Everything is pretty much the same. B, if you don't have access to vocal training, it actually is a good enough method to start trusting your voice and to start working at the level of emotion, because emotion directly speaks to your voice. So if you are feeling like you don't have access or you don't have funds or whatever it is, you can literally take charge and start training yourselves by changing your emotional response to different notes. That
Yeah.
already is going to change your voice. And number three, when you're singing with perfect technique, you can't feel any pain, any strain, any yank. It feels like you're floating. It
Yeah.
feels like that's why all great singers, when people go to them and say, how did you do that? They're like, I don't know. And that's the perfect answer. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to know. Let the body do its
Yeah.
job.
The floatiness feels good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Vasundhara, for joining me on Out of the Box. This was a real eye-opening session, to say the least. To everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.